And we have a stand-up comedian today. Not really, just joking. Welcome to the Port Hueneme Historical Society Museum and our Distinguished Speakers Series. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize Frank and Sue Nallman are here. Frank's a supporter of the museum, and he also speaks every now and then as one of our guest speakers. Also, Orvine and Georgia Carpenter are here. Thank you very much for coming. Orvine has been a long-standing person of importance to the city of Port Hueneme, and the community center is named after him. So thank you for your contributions. A couple little quick things. On September 29th, the Banana Festival. Go Bananas, B-A-N-N-A-S, across the street. So that's coming up. Also on October 20th, we'll have the next Lighthouse Tour. So if you're interested in going on a Lighthouse Tour, you can sign up here, and there's more information in the back. And on August 17th, that will be the next Port Tour. And again, there's a flyer in the back, and you can sign up for that as well. Today, we have the honor of having Eileen Tracy here. And Eileen used to get her kicks by doing research. You know, she found researching relaxing, which is interesting. She was a docent at the Heritage Square, also at the Stagecoach Inn, and the Dudley House. I've never even heard of the Dudley House.
Yeah, I can find out and get information from each one that is unpublished.
So today, she's going to talk about two questions. Why did the city of Oxnard develop in the middle of nowhere? Pretty big question. And the second one, what roles did the multi-talented J.Y. Saviers and his entrepreneurial wife Martha play in that development? So Eileen is going to share with us what she learned from those relaxing moments of researching in and around the county.
Okay,
Thank you.
ready, set, go.
Let's go.
So, could you repeat? I said one. When Martha was born. But first I want to answer the question that you just said. Why would J.Y. Saviers get land, one of the original purchasers, in the middle of nowhere where, why would you do that, right? It's not near the Canal Trail, it's not near the ocean, and I'll explain now. This is what we call Fifth Street. This is Ranch from the Sanborn maps. And this is Rose. So think about it. What's located about here? About, I guess here. The Oxnard Waterworks. And that aquifer is one of the healthiest aquifers around. And the water, if you get your water from that waterworks in Oxnard, it's really great. And it was, in the early days, it was so busy that, you know, water was squirting out of it, went over towards what we call Oxnard Boulevard the second, made a lake called Hueneme Lake, and went all the way diagonally down towards what we call Ventura and Woolley. And so much water was just for the taking there. So naturally, in a place where water might be a consideration, you would locate near the aquifer. Okay, so Jenny was picking on Martha because she was quite an entrepreneurial lady. And I always like to tell people she wasn't sitting around with lace gloves drinking tea all day. You'll see about what I'm saying there. So, yeah, Martha was born in Waltham.
Say, Eileen, can I ask her a question?
Yeah.
You mentioned, what was it,
Hueneme.
Lake?
Yeah.
Okay, now there's a Hueneme Street right over
Yeah,
there.
I
What's
know.
up with that? Tell me.
I don't know, I do know that Martha's dad, Henry Polly, had a house over there. But apparently, I did look up Hueneme, and it's because everybody in the midsection was Freemason. And apparently in the Freemason, they at least used to have some kind of secretary or something, and they called it the Hueneme. Because at one point, Martha acted as a Hueneme. But it's very little information on Huenemes. So, okay.
I'll work on
Oh, good, and you can bring it to me to speak to next time, you can let us know.
I'll email it to you.
So, Henry's father, or pardon me, Martha's father, Henry Polly, was a foreman at what later would become the Waltham Watch Company. And her family, the Kellum, she's Martha Kellum, Polly was her maiden name. The Kellum family was pretty well-to-do, and they owned most of the stock in the watch company, which later would become the Waltham Watch Company. And so, right. So they did, when they decided to come to California, they sold out all their shares in the company, which then became the Waltham Watch Company. I don't know how many people have ever heard of it, but a lot of people know it as a very valuable watch to own. So, could you advance? Oh, good. So here's what happened. The Kellums sold all their shares, and the whole family, and I don't know how many people it was, but them and the Polly kids and parents jumped on a ship, came, skip to it. Okay, well, I'm just gonna tell you anyways. So the ship took them down to Panama, and then it had to take 3 days and ride donkeys to get up over the mountains, to get over to the Pacific Ocean, where they'd grab another ship and go on up to San Francisco. And Martha, I can't remember what I was gonna say, but anyway, that's how they came. And it was all the Pollys and all the Kellums. The Kellums took all their bunches of money and set up a really high-class merchandise store. And guess what? Gold miners weren't interested in high-class merchandise, so they went broke pretty fast. And but this is where her dad, Henry, who was a spirited gentleman, joined one of the original vigilante committees. And he also was a Freemason. And I think I told this before, he bragged that he was pretty sure that the only people that were ever hung by the vigilantes were Democrats, so it was okay. So after they went broke, they went down to Sacramento. And her father opened the very first mill in Sacramento. And this is a picture of a millstone on the slide. So, because what happened, they were sitting down to dinner, and something happened at the mill, and there was an explosion. And the millstone supposedly went up through the roof, traveled over to their house, came down through their roof, and as they sat at the dining room table, it landed right smack on the dining room table and went down on the ground. Family lore, but and it's a good story. So, yeah. And nobody was hurt. That's the good news. And the next slide. I mentioned about the Freemasons. It seems like J.Y. was a Freemason, her father was a Freemason, and it seems like everybody he knew was a Freemason. And he found this blacksmith over in Mendocino County. So that was Martha's first husband. And she had one son by that David, son is Henry, and he was a heavy drinker. So here's the first sign of Martha being a really independent person. She divorced him. Can you believe that? In 1862-ish. I couldn't get any pictures of Mendocino County. Next one, let me get at that. That's Henry. Henry Beasley, her son. And there's a picture on the wall there, which I stole. That's his wagon. He first, I found him first having a lot of land somewhere below Hueneme Road, way over past the great facility, the wastewater treatment plant. And the problem with owning land down there was you're farming, and then every once in a while you have to jump off your tractor, and you could be jumping into quicksand, because there was a lot of it. So this is one worthless tidbit I like to throw in here. And he then turns up later on in a small house on C Street in Oxnard. He and his wife, Tenny Glenn, never had children. And I don't know, he wasn't a public figure like Martha and her husband. So that's the first son.
So where did you get that picture of the factory scale? Or was it just that there?
I'm sorry.
It says Beasley's team at factory scale Oxford.
Right on the wall here. Beverly Kelly,
Really?
the world's greatest researcher, came up with it.
Cool.
Yeah. So after Martha divorced Mr. Beasley, I don't find evidence of her, but her father moved to a toll station on the old wagon road. What was the old wagon road? It was a popular way for people coming into California with their Conestoga wagons. And they would come in from the Donner Pass down to Auburn, California. And there was 3 toll houses on the road. And Henry's father ran the middle one. And they could exchange horses at this particular one. And that's a picture of Polly Corners. And if you drive up on that road now, there still is a sign saying Polly Corners. I was like, oh my God, it's really cool. It had about 20 rooms, so I think that they must have been letting people stay overnight as needed, I suppose, in bad weather or something. But then quickly a railroad came in. It may have been the Southern Pacific. And then nobody bothered to use the old wagon road after that. So, and as you can see, isn't this a pathetic picture of all the wagons coming across? I mean, it makes you feel like there's nothing nobody you'd ever want to do that with, right? Yeah, put that picture. Okay, let me move to open. It's okay. But, so the next time she turns up, I first want to say it's possible that Martha met J.Y. at the Polly Corners when her father had that big house because on and off he would drive a stage that carried the mail because he was friends with some important people. And it's possible that that's where they met. You know, the problem is when you're researching a woman in 1800, it's hard to gather really accurate information. You have to find little things here and there, and the family writes stories, and you know, you better prove it before you repeat it because there's some whoppers in there. And so I kind of match what they say with the real history of an area to see what blends in best. Anyways, she was married to J.Y. in Oakland in 1871. And yeah, and that's where all the Kellums moved. Today, if you research the people who are living in Oakland, there's still a lot of Kellums there. So that was pretty good. And she was staying with one of the Kellums there. I guess that was after the Polly Corners shut down. Anyway, so somehow or other, she and J.Y. got married in Oakland in 1872.
Who's J.Y. there?
Oh, I'm sorry, James Young, Saviers.
Oh, okay, now it makes sense.
All right.
James Young.
Yeah, that was his mother's name. I think I mentioned last time I spoke. His mother was a distant cousin of Brigham Young in Ohio. And Youngstown, Ohio, and blah, blah. So they were kind of influential, I assume. And I like this, I like to make this point. In the original days, from the ocean all the way up, I don't know, towards the Conejo Trail, that was called Hueneme Township number 2, because there was no Oxnard. So it was one of the identities of Hueneme in the early days.
So, so Winfred, Scott, George, and Charles, was that Martha's
Oh, I'm
sons,
sorry.
or-
No, it was, you know, he was married before, and so this is a second marriage for both of them.
Okay.
He was up in Northern California, and his wife passed away, and his 2 oldest children passed away.
Really?
And after she passed away, he came down here
With the 3?
with 3 of them, yeah. Well, actually, one of them was the baby, Charles. I think I must have stayed with brother John until he was old enough for a man to raise him. So, pardon me.
They're coming for you, Larry.
Oh, and I like that part about 4 to 6 houses between El Rio and Hueneme Road.
Is that Santa Clara River,
Yeah,
El Rio?
yeah, it was a stagecoach stop. So it's on the Conejo Trail. And we still call it El Rio, actually. And here is their daughter, Eva. That's the second child she ever had, and the last child she ever had. And then, so she had his 3 sons, her 1 son, and then Eva. And then her sister, Lottie, who was married to a drunken Englishman in Eggleston, passed away. So Martha and J.Y. took in their 5 children. So immediately their family was up to 10. And I want to say this on this Sanborn map. The grandson reported, like, part of their house was the parlor and kitchen. And then he built a long line of bedrooms with a porch attached. So every time more people came, he had another room, and that was what he did. I don't know, I never could figure out if he was using adobe or wood, because wood was not terribly plentiful. In the early days, there was a forest in Capateria, and these settlers wiped out that forest pretty quick. Then after that, they were floating some of the lumber down towards us, and then the rats would pick it up and bring it in. So when I see pictures of his early house, I don't see the house actually, but one of his farmer's houses, it is wood. And so I assume from that this house was wood also. Now, on the next one. Yeah, let's just list all the children that they were raising. And at that time, Henry Pelly was drilling for water wells for any of the farmers that wanted a well. And her brothers worked with the dad. And whenever they needed a place to stay, they hauled in at Saviers Ranch too. So, the other thing I want to mention, around this section, what we call Fifth, he had 2 wells drilled, and water accumulated. He put a faucet on them so they wouldn't run incessantly. But because they were there, he put in a pond because he liked catfish. And so you can assume Martha and her cooks were cooking catfish. That was part of their diet. And as many of you know, down here at Magoo and at Ormond Beach, ducks and geese were plentiful. And that's why we put the shooting gallery in down here. So you can assume that in addition to catfish, they were eating a lot of ducks and geese maybe. Now Martha had 2.5 Chinese people assisting her in the housework, who were trained to be cooks up north in Gold Country. Apparently, they were really good cooks. So, so they were there also. I don't know where they stayed though, if they stayed in the house or in other quarters, like possibly over here, and they had group quarters.
Did you say 2.5?
Yes, I did say that. It was just slice one down the center. No, what it was, I mean, what I assume it was. The one that was only working half time probably had to work in the barns because he had 40 horses year round. Because when he was planting or harvesting, he needed 40 workers. But year round, he really only used 10 of them. But my guess is that the half a worker that Martha had to share was to clean and feed the horses in the barns. Could be wrong on that. Yeah, okay, so I did all that. And this is just a brief history of what Martha was running around doing. She, her mother gave birth to 15 children. Martha was the oldest. So as time went on, I assume that Martha developed a lot of midwife skills. And so when she was down here in Hueneme, it said that she delivered hundreds of babies. So,
You said there was only 4 or 5 houses.
Yeah.
yeah, I think it could have been later. Well, it was 10 or 12 back
Did
then.
neighbors?
And as part of was selling the land, 10 or 12 houses in between their ranch and the ocean. So that's the first thing she was doing, the midwife. And then in the early days, you know, there was only one tree in a cactus patch. And so fuel became really challenging. And so she, the Camarillos, a whole bunch of people started to import eucalyptus from Australia. And it is said that one tree could provide the fuel for an entire year.
Is it true that those trees in Australia, the bark, I've heard this, I don't know if it's true, that the tree in Australia, the bark wouldn't splinter and it was used for building, and then when it came over here to the other hemisphere, the bark
Weather.
twisted. You know,
Yeah.
when you see eucalyptus, it's
I
not
do.
good for much other than burning and windbreaks.
Yeah.
On this side of the world.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's true or not.
could be. I've never researched eucalyptus trees in Australia, so it's a good story.
That's one of
though.
those stories
Good.
that escalates.
Yeah, one of those things that turns into a whopper.
Good.
Yeah. And in the 1800s, there's so little documentation.
I think there was a guy in Napomo that put together a whole eucalyptus forest. It's still there, remnants of it, right on the side of the freeway.
Yeah.
And that was where I heard the story that, well, you know, he thought it was going to be really good wood for building, but
Yeah, not to be. But
it's still there. Though,
I read one place that, you know, fleas were prevalent here. Two things, gophers and trees. And so the fleas would come in the houses and live under the carpets. So if they put in eucalyptus leaves, the fleas would leave. Who knew? So fuel and insect repellent. So
It works.
I like the smell.
I'm just going to do an aside right here. So as you, I'm sure you know, the early roads were just dirt paths. This is just a bunch of my worthless information. And when it rained, it would really be muddy. And so many farmers would throw haystacks down along the road so their wagons could travel. And guess what happens? Fleas love hay, apparently. And so now picture you ladies, if you were wearing a floor-length dress and you wanted to cross the street, at the other side, you'd be covered with fleas. They would just jump on your dress, your skirt's really fast. So I don't know what they would do in that case. But And so the fleas lived there. And I don't know if they had to have hay or not, but they were prevalent around here. The other thing, the gophers. I read that you'd have to be careful when your horses were pulling wagons down the road, because if there was a gopher hole, the horse would break their leg. So I don't know how they dealt with that, but I'm sure in time the road became compacted. When I just have a lot of this worthless stuff. So the last thing, Martha decided she wanted to experiment with citrus, so she asked her husband to give her 81 acres. And you know, he was a land hog. He had 381 acres on this place. But every time Tom Bard had some land that he couldn't lease right away, Saviers would grab it. And because he just never did anything small. So in the early days, as you know, they were planting barley and stuff. He just wanted to do wheat. Well, they tried wheat, and it couldn't be grown around here because it's too humid. So we went up to Simi Valley, took up 1,000 acres up there north of what we call Los Angeles Avenue. And also we went on over in what we call Newberry, and took land there because he just was an addict about growing wheat. So, but I like that about Martha, that she wanted to experiment with citrus. It's pretty ingenious. Welcome. Are you here to visit or for the speech?
We're just looking around.
Oh, check it out, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, come see everything. Enjoy. It's a free country down here. And the other thing about her was she planted roses around the house. And as you can imagine, when there's a lot of cattle around, you better have a fence around your house. And so she lined it with rose bushes. And it's said that at one point, 6 years in a row, she had roses blooming. So she must have had a great thumb. And so I assume that her trees were pretty healthy too. So that's that one. So now they moved down to Abilene in 1888 because the squatter's lawsuit was finally settled in 88. And so J.Y. had to give up a lot of his land because it turned out it belonged to the squatters. And he decided at that time there had been a no fence law in Texas. And at that time, Texas revoked that law. So farmers could come. And so who was one of the first people down here, J.Y., wanted to go down and grow a lot of wheat, 1,000 acres in Texas, which is what he did. And every year after his crop, he would take his profit and get another 1,000. And the next year he'd get another 1,000 acres. And he was like, you know, a wheat addict, I guess. Until the last year they lived there, the entire crop was destroyed by grasshoppers. So you could see he made a lot of money, and he also lost a lot of money. But it never stopped him till later on in life. So down there in Texas, when he had all this land, Martha was alone, and she didn't want to live in the middle of a wheat field of 1,000 acres. So she came into town and started setting up a business for herself, which was seamstress shop. And then it was a dressmaker shop, and then it became a milliner shop. So she and her daughters were living in town and had a pretty good business, yes.
What town were they?
Abilene.
Oh.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty original for her to come up and do that. So now she went to Hueneme. So after the grasshoppers ate all the wheat, they came up here to Hueneme. And they lived on Main Street for 2 years only. Yeah, and it's hard to say what he was doing then, but I think somehow he got himself appointed as the precinct judge. for the voting precinct. And because a lot of the family let him go, said he was a judge. He was a precinct judge. His brother was, as soon as Ventura County was created in 73, his brother John he did become a judge. But it wasn't J.Y. till he became the precinct judge in Hueneme.
So, Eileen, that picture, that's Hueneme?
Yes. Some of my pictures are actually valid.
So, do you know, what is that Hueneme Road? Or?
Market. I mean, I just always assume it's Market.
And Market is what, the street right over here?
Yeah. And Hueneme Road is called Main Street.
No, Hueneme Road was called Broad Street.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Main Street is now Seaview. And that's Broad Street.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Larry. Yeah. And you know, it's great, on the next slide, you'll see there was a fire in Hueneme on Main Street. And many of the shops that were there burned down. Because, you know, there was no fire department, so God forbid you had a fire, because you're on your own.
So, the fire, what, do you know what year that was?
1893, 94.
1894.
Yeah, and they were living there on Main Street, so
Oh,
they had to get out. It's not actually a picture of Hueneme, but it is a picture of all the destruction. And as you probably have heard, this building is originally the Hueneme Bank. And the first Hueneme Bank was the one down in the fire and burned down. So that's sad. So I guess they decided not to live down there anymore. Yeah. So that was very sad about that fire. You know, there he is that the fire truck down there?
No,
The
that's,
fire
yeah, that's a
apparatus.
fire extinguisher that they had.
Extinguisher. So you can imagine for a large fire running around with that red bucket, how much of the fire you could put out. So, that was sad. Anyways. Now in 1903, Oxnard became the city. Because as you know, probably know, Oxnard Brothers brought in the sugar beet factory 5 years before that. And then, so enough people moved to Oxnard, including most of the Hueneme residents. And
What kind of a factory?
sugar beet, sugar. Yeah. Cane sugar was also made, but for some reason it was made out of beets too, beet sugar.
Where'd they grow? Because Monterey was a big sugar beet area.
Yes, there are many sugar beet factories. I saw one.
Growing them here, the sugar beet?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what happened was, it was a lot of scientists from Europe, and the Oxnard brothers brought the scientists in, and they went around teaching the farmers how to grow sugar beets with a high sugar content. And they put in what is called the Patterson Ranch, which is now the Navy base here. And that's where they did a lot of experimenting, but growing sugar beets too. I saw one wagon with a sugar beet that was so huge. I mean, it was like the size of a man.
Really?
And I guess that meant there was a lot of sugar in there. And this is where a lot of the information I got was from their grandson, Pat Foster. After they moved to Hueneme in 1903 and took a house on East 6th Street, he asked Eva and her husband to come and live there and take care of him because he had sugar diabetes pretty bad. He was weighing about 260 pounds in those days. And so they paid, and so Pat, the young boy, for 2 years he sat with J.Y. And J.Y. told him all the stories of all his adventures with his 3 wagon trains and whatever he was doing. Wagon making, because, you know, in the Golden Country, if you came across in a kind of stoke wagon, that's not going to work in Golden Country at all. So you have to get a regular wagon, and J.Y. was a wagon master, wagon maker. So for 2 years, Pat listened to all the stories, and he was fascinated with the adventure that his grandfather had, you know, but, and in 1904, J.Y. passed away.
Jay, I think on the previous slide, there was mention of, who was Scott?
Oh, Scott was
Scott.
J.Y.'s oldest son that lived. And Scott
And
stayed.
this was from his previous marriage, his first marriage?
Yeah. And Scott, for example, the Hueneme Cemetery, it was him that brought his plows down to set up the Hueneme Cemetery, because he was a mason too.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard about Scott Saviers a lot.
Yeah, he had a house on Saviers Road, and the front lawn, he had a road coming in and going up, but he made it in the shape of a heart. And planted flowers in there, so maybe he was a romantic guy. The family did complain that he didn't talk that much, so you have to work hard to get him to talk and tell his stories.
Is that Mojave, California? You went to the desert, the sliding fork? Yeah, that one. Is that where you lived?
Oh,
Yeah, who moved to Mojave in 1901?
oh, Eva and her husband. I'll tell a little story about that. So she was born in 73. Around 1890, she and a cowhand ran away and eloped and got married. And J.Y. was fit to be tied. And he grabbed a couple of guns going out to find John Foster, because he was going to blow him away. And Martha was so worried. So she asked her foreman to go find J.Y. and bring him home with his guns. So, but he never spoke to the young man until his deathbed. He was so angry that he did that to Eva. But on his deathbed, he admitted that John Foster had been a good husband to Eva.
So Eva was J.Y.'s daughter?
J.Y. and Martha both, yeah.
Yeah, oh, that was her daughter.
Really daughter, yeah. Think they were practicing birth control? We don't know. So anyways, Pat, the one that visited with Grandpa for 2 years, he wrote an 11-page letter of all the history that he learned from his grandfather and sent it to a family member. And I was lucky enough to contact using Ancestry, to contact that person, and she sent that letter to me.
Wow. So
And
you had it.
that's how I got all this information. I'm really, well, most of the information that I'm giving out here.
Now, did you put this together in a book form or anything?
No.
It's-
No, I did a little booklet years ago when I first came to Oxford because I wanted to know why was Oxford in the middle of nowhere. And in those days, Mullhart wasn't doing his stories. Nobody was around that. I didn't know Frank. Nobody was around that seemed to know much about the history of Oxnard. So I started after work going to the Ventura Museum Research Library 3 days a week. And the last 2 hours of the day, I could read the old Ventura Signal newspapers, go through all the books. And that was really how I discovered J.Y. because, I mean, he seemed like kind of an exciting guy in the early days. So I started researching J.Y. And little tidbits about Martha would pop up every once in a while. And I thought, you know what? I'm researching the wrong person. So I started trying to study Martha, but, you know, I couldn't get much in the newspaper. Well, there's only one article in the newspaper about Martha. There was a women's club down in Hueneme here, and Martha joined it, and they had a flower table at the fair one year. And she was one of the presenters. She was so proud of the flowers. But that was it. That's the only time her name was in the paper, except when J.Y. died. Because a doctor, she apparently developed diabetes, and he had diabetes. And a doctor told them they shouldn't live together anymore because it wasn't healthy for them to be together, which is a crock. And so she went and lived with Eva, and that's when he came and stayed with his son Scott for a while until he bought the house on 6th Street. So, yeah, that's kind of
So,
what this piece of information.
do you know where J.Y. is buried?
In your cemetery, yeah.
In Sunny Cemetery?
But he's not buried where it says Saviors, it says Saviors, that just happens to be something that Scott put in there. JY doesn't have a stone. So I had to go to the museum because Charles Johnson had a diagram of all the people buried in that cemetery. And finally I found JY's,
Really?
yeah, burial plot. And a little granddaughter must have died and she was buried in the corner of the plot that he was buried in.
So,
Yeah.
but there's no stone mark?
No stone. You gotta go to the museum and get that map. And I don't know if Charles still has it, but at the time he did.
Now,
Yeah.
what family was left to go back to Texas?
Well, John Foster and Eva went there.
The
Well,
daughter.
actually, the daughter, because they were in Texas when they eloped too. And then they came out to California because they were here. And,
Was Martha went back to Texas too?
yeah, so when they went back to Texas later on, she had to go with them. They went to quite a few places, but they wound up in Texas. And, oh, the next slide, yep, da-da-da-da-da. That is literally Martha's headstone. One of the family members that I found with using Ancestry lived down there, and she went to the graveyard. I told her what the name of the graveyard was, the Hollywood Cemetery. So she went there. She had always assumed that Martha was buried up here, and I was like, no, I know she's died there. And sure enough, she took a picture of the grave and sent it to me. So,
How did they travel?
Yeah.
Because
an amazing.
I remember driving cross country, and it took a long time to get to Texas, took a long time to get across Texas. So I was just wondering, how did they move around so freely? It just seems
I
very
know.
difficult.
I know, that's the part that blows me away too. Like JY 3 wagon trains, are you serious? I mean, if I had taken 1 wagon train, I would never travel anywhere ever again. I don't even like traveling on an airplane.
I think with the trains in then, I think maybe.
Well, certainly in 1906.
There was trains.
1900s.
Yeah.
Massachusetts, California, Texas.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the story.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Call your question.
Now, where are you from originally?
Rochester, New York.
Oh,
I know their history too, by the way. Because, history is like an addiction again. When I lived in D.C., I go to all the little towns around there and study the history of everything.
And they pronounce their name Saviors.
No, Saviors.
Savers.
Saviors.
Isn't that funny?
They were growing it also.
Savers.
So how do you think it got to be Saviors?
It was Saviors, but they just pronounced it Savers.
Well, they did pronounce it.
Although one of the earlier ancestors of JY is a general, and he was down in Tennessee, and his name was spelled Saviers, S-E-V-I-E-R-S.
There's a town in Tennessee.
Really?
I think it's got some connection with Dolly Park.
Oh.
I've heard of it.
Oh, yeah, it's
A
Nashville.
lot of trips.
I mean, one of those.
Right.
Any more questions?
We just learned that it's Frank's birthday today. Is that
Not
correct?
today.
Not today? Is it today?
August 2nd.
August 2nd. Well, all
We're going to sing happy birthday.
yeah, let's wish Frank a happy birthday.
This is for missing your birthday, pal.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Frank. Happy birthday to you. Many
Give him a
more.
ring.
Thank you, thank
I'm
you.
about being put on the spot.
Yeah.
Worst song ever written. Must be hard to, I mean, it's impossible to sing.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. It was great, and we have a tradition here of passing the hat to support the museum and some of the expenses we have here. So I'm going to put this over here. I want to also remind you that next Sunday is going to be Beach Glass Jewelry Workshop. It's really popular.
Postponed.
It's postponed?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not. I have a flyer here that's accurate. But when it starts up again, make sure you come. It's really good.
And Frank's gonna be speaking in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
It'll be entertaining and fun.
Well, thank you for spending your Saturday here.
And I want to say thank you for coming and for your great attention.
Thank you.
I often, if you meet me on the street and give me a chance, I'll start talking about Saviers. And then people's eyes close. Shut up.
Well, it's probably not the only one you've studied.
No, I suppose not. But I just got so captivated by who goes across country on a wagon train 3 times.
Well, the Donner Pass crossing was all Conestoga and covered wagon, and I'm sure the hotel that was there was for the weather, because the weather in Donner Pass was terrible.
Brutal.
Well, it still is.
But Texas,
Yeah.
Texas is known for its heat, right? I mean,
What is?
Texas. is a hot
Yeah,
place.
heat and humidity.
Yeah.
And horse manure.
And I just assume that wheat is a dry land crop. So you don't have to have irrigation, I guess, to grow wheat
It's all the Midwest, isn't it?
until the grasshoppers come.
Very interesting. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
I appreciate everybody's attention.
Thank you.
Really nice.
Nose clearing.
What? We're done.
Oh, yeah.
And my father.
Bye. I will see you soon.
Hey. Fine, how are you?
Well, I left my keys in my car. I had to walk back home and pick up my keys.
Oh, no.
By the time I got here, I missed about 15 or 20 minutes. Wait, you are always wearing such neat. You're very colorful, you know.
Thank you.
No, I mean, like I've seen a couple of shoes. I mean,
I've already told everybody in here, this is my shop.
I'm assuming that's well, it sounds very impressive.
Well,
but-
my daughter called J.C. Penney's, that was her.
Oh, Jacques Penet. I said Jacques Penet. Oh, now I know.
Yeah, she had the role.
So anytime you have French names to it, I guess it makes it sound that much more impressive, you know.
We have.
That was good.
It's like when you go to Target, it's Le Target.
Yeah.
You say, you know.
She brought the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Letter Newport. And we have a
Yeah.
We've been to the lighthouse now. A couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I think that's indicative of the sexes, because like when I go with my wife, she's shopping, but with nothing in particular. She's just kind of like browsing.
to do that.
Yeah. And like usually guys, it's kind of like, okay, we're here. Okay, we're here to buy this. Okay, let's move on, you know.
See, now that's me.
Yeah, it's
I know exactly what I want. I go in, choop, 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 and I'm out of there. Now
Okay.
my husband is the one that likes
I
to go
surprised.
up and down the road.
So maybe it's not just between us,
And
but
no, well, my husband loves to shop. I don't. I have never liked shop.
Well, I used to, of course I can't.
Yeah, and when we got together, and He went to the, he said, oh, I need to run to the store. Oh, okay, go. He comes back with bags. I mean, he was gone forever. And I go, what's the store for? And he comes in with all these bags, and I'm like, what the hell? I mean, who are you gonna feed?
Okay, now I must say that going food shopping is a different thing. Like, my wife really doesn't like me to go with her to go food shopping. Because she'll have kind of a basic list of what she needs to buy. And I'll be throwing in things that were not on the list that
Oh, my
I kind of
husband,
like.
yeah, that's what my husband does. I don't, and I won't go shopping with him anymore because he likes to go up and down each row, and I'm like, you already know what's down there. Yeah, but if they move something or they got something new, how am I gonna know that? And my mom was the same way. My mom would need you to take her to the store, and it's like, I would drop my mom off and say, I'll be back in an hour. Yeah, see, I've never been like that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
You can't do that everywhere.
yeah.
Yeah, no, you
Well, you can, you know, the grocery stores have them, but they got small baskets. I mean, you can only put so much in that small
Well,
basket.
and not only that, but we go to Rouse because that's the closest for us. Out on that. Jump under.
Yeah, that's where we go.
Disappeared. All right, guys, I gotta run.
They have to drive.
Yeah.
I don't usually go there at all because of that.
Yeah, well, like I said, when I go to the store, it's like, I know what I want, and I know exactly where it is. Boom, 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 and I'm out of there.
pretty good. Got me, I mean, I know what I need to get, and then I'll embellish on that, like, you know, it's kind of, yeah.
Well, yeah, my husband does the same thing. It's like, oh, do you know what would really be good?
Yeah, let's get this, or.
Oh, you know.